Can you define the word Mischling?
Mischling is a Mischling. It's a German word for a Mischling. You are of mixed race, but it's evenly distributed between two grandparents being Jewish and two grandparents being Aryans. So that was the denomination that they gave us. Half Aryans, half Jews. It was a term that was interchangeable, because since Hitler was not interested in the religion of the people, but he considered the Jews an undesirable race. And as far as he was concerned, everybody who descended from Jews, even partially, was undesirable and was not expected to pass on any Jewish blood. Questionnaires were always asking, what's the religion of your grandparents? It never said, what's your religion? That was unimportant. What's the religion of your grandparents? And that automatically branded you as a half-Jew if you said two are Jewish.
This is Breslau, where my father and my godmother grew up before the war. It is now Wrocław, part of Poland. Many families like the Mendelssohns and my father's, converts who now identified as Christian, found both their lives and their identities disrupted as the Nazis rose to power. Moses Mendelssohn's own descendant, Franz Mendelssohn, joined the Nazi Party while still refusing to renounce the Mendelssohn family name. His daughter said, "I'm proud of the name, but I always had to explain our situation to the authorities. I would often get asked, 'Do you descend from that horrible Jew?'
What was interesting about that family and about a lot of other families in Germany in those days was that the generation of my grandfather were very much assimilated to being German first.
When they talk about the Holocaust, they talk about the Auschwitz, they talk about the concentration camp, they talk about the gas chambers, they talk about mistreatment of Jews, and so forth. But when you tell them about the story of the Mischling, they pop out their eyes and they don't know what we have in mind. But this is Mischling. It is something that bedeviled the Nazis themselves. They didn't even they didn't know how to handle that. But they thought it was of the greatest importance for them to solve the problem of Mischling. So what's the word Mischling? It's a German word. It's no longer used. It's no longer employed. If you check a German dictionary today, I doubt whether you'll find the word itself. It's a Nazi word, which implies people who are mixed half-breeds. They're not this and they're not that. What do I mean by that? The Nazis divided the human races genetically by blood, based on racial theories which were common in those days. And the other thing that the Nazis did, they intertwined this racial thinking with this demonic anti-Semitism that was already there, that saw the Jews as being not only that they are stubborn and they don't want to mix actually, or they don't want to convert to the mainstream religion, but they are conniving and they're basically evil. There's something evil about the Jews, but since they are few and since they know that there's something wrong with them, then they're making all the kinds of efforts to get over that by controlling the superior races. Conspiracies like the protocols of the Elders of Zion. Okay, the Jews want to dominate the world. How do they do that? Several ways. One way is that by getting their hands on the financial markets of the world, by controlling the money. Number two is by causing the nations of the world to go to war with each other, and by financing these wars, because without money you cannot go to war. And number three is, since their blood is contaminated, is bad, then they try to marry with Aryans in order, it's like a medicine, it's like an injection, in order to better their blood contents. And that is dangerous because that causes a bastardization. That's the term that they use, a bastardization of their offspring. So what we have to do, they said, the Nazis, is first of all, we have to remove the Jews from our midst, if we can, and prevent the Jews from having any kind of sexual relations with Aryans, okay? From Jews from contaminating the pure Aryan blood. So they went one step with the Nuremberg laws of 1935, which forbade marriage between Jews and non-Jews and forbade Jews from having sexual relations with members of the Aryan race. The Aryans are the Germans, the Scandinavians, and the Dutch. They were considered as part of the Aryan family. All right, so they were satisfied with this, but then they realized they got a bigger problem on their hand, because before Hitler came to power, there was a lot of assimilation in Germany. And thousands and thousands and thousands of Jews had intermarried with non-Jews. Some of them intermarried and they remained Jews. Some of them intermarried and they converted out. So there were tens of thousands of Jews who had converted. They were baptized and they were going to church. Some of them were ministers, but they were born Jewish. So the Nazis, this was no problem to them. They decided anyone who was born Jewish, as far as we're concerned, he's a Jew. We don't care if he practices any other religion. We don't care if he's a priest or that. He's a Jew and he can practice any kind of religion. How do we define a Jew? And the answer was, for anyone, we were going by their grandparents. Anyone who had 4 Jewish known grandparents, whether religious practicing or not, whether they were registered with the Jewish community or not, but they were known. Anyone who has 4 known Jewish grandparents is a Jew, period. Then they took it a step further. Anyone who has 3 known Jewish grandparents, 3, that too is a Jew, period. And nothing can be done about it. The big problem was, if a person has 2 Jewish grandparents and 2 Aryan grandparents, or if a person has 1 Jewish grandparents, but 3 Aryan grandparents, then this is what they did. A person who has 2 and 2, he is a Mischling grade A. Grade A, he's 50-50. A person who has 3 Aryan grandparents and 1 Jewish grandparent, he's a Mischling grade B. Now, most of these Mischling people were not practicing Jews. Some of them didn't even know that they had Jewish blood in them, especially someone who had 1 Jewish grandparent and 3 non-Jewish grandparents. He may have been baptized in the church. He may not even have known that he has one of his grandparents was Jewish.
You were on the list, you know, maybe 3 months, 6 months, 8 months. Our day was coming.
Right.
That's 100%. It was a law.
Were passed gradually. They were passed for the Jews in 1933. For the Mischling, they appeared in 1940. At that time, the half-Jews, the Mischlinge, had been drafted into the army when the war had started in 1939. And my brother, who was there together with a friend from Breslau, who was a non-Aryan, not a half-Aryan, but a non-Aryan. So he fled over the Pyrenees to Spain, and from Spain he went to England and saved his life this way. My brother did not dare do that. He wanted to. But since he thought and he knew that he was supposed to go into the army, he was afraid that Hitler, or the Nazis, would take it out on his family if he, as a German potential soldier, is fleeing into another country and is not coming back. So he came back. And they had just passed another law. If there was a new law, they didn't want them anymore. So they sent them back, and they did not draft any new ones. But it was a slow degradation of the lifestyle. It was going from worse to worse. Were regularly raided by the military and the Gestapo. So one of the two, I'm not sure which, probably the Gestapo, saw his military pass that he had, which identified him as a half-Jew. He was a tall, blonde guy and stuck out in those days in '43, like a sore thumb, not being in uniform and fighting for his fatherland. So somebody didn't like that, took him out of the train. And he looked in his files and he said, "Your brother has been shipped to Auschwitz." So I immediately got in touch with my parents, and my father got on the train to go to Auschwitz and rescue his son. Well, he never got to Auschwitz, of course. I mean, they didn't allow tourists or regular persons to get there. So he came back, and then we got a letter from my brother. He was allowed to write. We have 2 letters from Auschwitz. And in the last one that was dated the 4th of July, he did not write the letter himself. It was written in some other's handwriting, but he signed it. And it said, the news about John, or some other name, about his TB breaking out again is very sad, and I hope that he will recover. And we, of course, knew that he was talking about himself. And then several weeks later, my father was ordered to the Gestapo in Breslau and was handed a death certificate that was dated the 8th of July. So he died on the 8th of July, supposedly.
While we worked very hard and also had a limited amount of food, our spirits were relatively good because of the radio reception we had, or that the end of the war is near. When the Russian is close so that we could hear the cannons, our guards as well as we decided to move further west, and our guards put us into a heavily wired prison camp, and we thought we were caught in a bad position. We tested the wires and the barbed fences and found out they were not electrified, so we slept the night there and then went as a group further west. By that time we walked through forests and heavy snow, and it was physically very draining after the hard work at the camp to keep on marching through the snow.
And anyway, I went onto a freight car and I collapsed. For 3 days I was on the freight car and I don't know anything what happened there. Anyway, it wound up to be to go to Vienna, around Czechoslovakia. when the Russians came again, so we all found a bicycle each, 4 bicycles, and a little cart about that size for all our things on top there, including a typewriter. We needed a typewriter, obviously we needed a typewriter. And with the typewriter, we got some paper, because it was still Nazi time, you see. So we always typed a letter that we were on our way on an important mission, and we needed food stamps. So we went to all those village burgermeisters or mayors, and we got food stamps, and then we could eat. Right? And when we went as far as Kaufbeuren im Allgäu, and that's where we knew the Americans would come.
so much.
Thank you, Emily, for having me, and
Yeah.
thank you all for coming.
So I thought for the audience, I'll just ask Carolyn a couple questions, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience as well. So can you, I know you converted to Judaism, so can you speak a little bit about your dad's response to your conversion?
Sure. So, you see that, maybe you have to kind of pick up some of the pieces that are running through this, but my grandmother, my father's mother, converted to Christianity after she married my grandfather, which then, it didn't necessarily set up my father's Mischling. The fact that she was Jewish is what then created this racial category of being a Mischling. And he was originally married to Ursula Enger. You saw their photo and then their ship manifest record. And that, after they arrived in the United States, they had my older sister, and after a few years, that marriage ended in divorce. And my father met my mother. She was a Presbyterian from Philadelphia, and she got a teaching position. She was an early childhood educator, and she got a teaching position in Long Island, and she thought, well, she liked going to Broadway shows. They had the runouts in Philadelphia, and so here she could come to New York and see the shows there. So she ended up in a teaching position on Long Island. In the meantime, my sister was in a foster family because my father got custody, going to school at she was in kindergarten out there. And so then my father went to the back to school night and met this charming young woman. She became my mother, so he, I think, had this kind of quest to come to the United States and just keep moving. And with her, then he had, in a sense, like cover, because he had an American wife, and so we were raised I was baptized. My godparents are German Jews, actually, who ended up at the Presbyterian Church in Tenafly because my godmother liked the music. So it's all kind of, that's the whole point of this, is kind of this way and that way. So anyway, I then was raised as a Christian, as a Methodist. My mom made the switch from being a Presbyterian to being a Methodist, so I don't know if that resonates for anybody at this point in history. But so I ended up at Vassar College. I'll get to answer your question. I'm sorry. So I was at Vassar College and didn't like the piano teacher that I was assigned, and so the piano teacher that I had in high school got a position at Malloy College. So I transferred from Vassar to this school on Long Island, Malloy, and there were 9 credits of theology that were required because it was a Catholic college. One of the classes I took was an intro to Judaism. So in my 20s, I sort of, found my way back, in a sense, to Judaism. And I started going to services, and I really felt kind of that this was a good fit. It just felt very, very natural for me. And then when anyone would ask me, well, what are you? This was the answer. And so, it's, someone would have to have good listening skills. So I wanted a one-word answer. So I went through a Reform conversion, and then at some point, then in between marriages, I was thinking about making Aliyah to Israel. And somebody said to me, well, but you're not really Jewish. And, this whole thing about Reform conversions and everything else with the chief rabbinate in Israel. So I then went through, I thought, well, no one's ever going to tell me that again. So I then went through an Orthodox conversion. And so while I was going through these processes, anytime I had a conversation with my father, somehow, you know, if we were going out to dinner, going to a play, whatever it was, somehow I waited for the shoe to drop in the conversation. Don't be Jewish. And I argued with him. I said, well, why not? You know, what's the difference to you if I go someplace on a Saturday or a Sunday? Well, don't join. Don't be on any list. So this was coming from a question of physical safety. It had nothing to do with a theological dialogue. So I didn't, I mean, I grew up in a very safe area outside of Manhattan, a lovely suburb, and I couldn't understand even that kind of a fear. And then, tying to you and your community, the Tree of Life happened, and I thought, it was after he had passed, thankfully, and I thought, oh, he was right. So, I don't know, it's just gotten worse. And then my dear friend Rennick, actually the last time I was in Pittsburgh, took me there, and it was kind of just a handful of months after it had happened. So it's very meaningful for me to be here in Pittsburgh to do this and to present it, because I feel that, I'm gonna get emotional. Your community was kind of like I mean, it shattered everything of what we felt here in the United States as American Jews, that, you know, this Holocaust and the physical harm coming to Jews and murder was sort of, it was part of our past and past our imagination. It couldn't happen here. And now, I don't know, just sort of we're flooded. Anyway, so thank you for welcoming me here.
I could ask a lot of questions, but I thought maybe I'd open it up and see if anyone in the audience has questions first before I continue on. You can just raise your hand and Noah will run the microphone over to you if you have any questions. Here, we've got one, Noah. Down here.
I think that maybe everybody would hear.
It'll help
okay.
the microphone.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure I totally understand this, and that is that a very long time ago, there were Jews, as you pointed out with different, when you had the dates, that wanted to become Christian, okay? Right? I mean, this was way before anything with Germany, with worried about Hitler or anything. I mean, there were some people, Jewish people, that wanted to become Christian.
100%, yeah.
Okay.
You have characters here in this film in the 19th century. I mean, it was a question of assimilating so that they could, in a sense, I don't think it was theological. I think it was socioeconomic.
Okay, that's it. So, but then I wondered, then as that went on, then when it started to be really the pressure of being Jewish and being with the whole period of Hitler,
yes.
Then there was another group of people, then that was different, wasn't it? Then there was another group of Jewish people that thought if they became Catholic or another religion, then they wouldn't be identified as Jewish and would, it was a whole different reason then that they were converting, or am I mixing it up? I'm just, historically in my head, I'm trying to understand kind of the progression.
Thank you for your question. So I don't know that the motivations would have been any different in a sense.
Really?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's something that we don't really think about here in the United States when we're talking about anti-Semitism. In Europe, there wasn't separation of church and state. And so, and in the United States, we do have separation of state, church and state. And so when we're talking to different people and meeting people of different faiths, it's a question of belief, more or less, rather than
Access to things.
yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, like the Jewish community in Germany had to pay, the whole community had to pay a tax to the government, and then the government would provide services for that Jewish community. It's still the case now. And we don't have that in the United States. We don't have on our driver's license what faith we are part of. You know, it's considered kind of, you know, intimate, private information. So why did my grandmother convert? I think she didn't really have much of a connection to Judaism. You know, a lot of Jews were, especially in Germany, were assimilated, heavily assimilated. I mean, we have some of that here in this country, and we don't really think much of you know, our Jewish grandkids or children, you know, intermarrying, and then there's kind of like an inclusiveness, and families just kind of broaden their horizons in a way. And but then with this racial science and eugenics and racial hygiene of needing to have a pure race, then the whole thing gets all very, very dangerous, really. Go ahead.
I will say we have a couple of members in our generations community, like our generation speakers community, which is children and grandchildren of survivors, who have discovered that they're descendants of Holocaust survivors because, for example, in one situation, her grandparents changed their name, their identity, converted to Roman Catholicism after the war, because when they came to America, they wanted to be able to kind of start over. And she learned this after her grandmother died, that she had this whole story that they didn't share. And so she's done all this uncovering. So there are a lot of people like this that, I mean, you knew about your family, but there was a lot of assimilation, and then post-war, many people who converted out of fear of what could happen again.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, basically, whenever Jews get comfortable in an area, that's kind of why we end up being such a small portion of the population. Now, I'm talking about, you know, thousands of years. Get to a spot, okay, you know, kind of get comfortable, there's assimilating, intermarrying, and then, you know, there's this remnant who kind of stay within the fold. But, I mean, I don't know, you know, the Gomez was a Spanish Jewish name. You know, it sort of gets washed around in history, so, but we're still here.
How did the last Mendelssohn you mentioned in your presentation deal with balancing his becoming a Nazi with his heritage and his pride for his name, etc.?
There's sort of a mental gymnastics that people do in order to kind of just, I don't know that he necessarily identified so much with his forebearer, you know, Moses Mendelssohn, who was Felix and Fanny Mendelssohn's grandfather, who's the great German Jewish philosopher who had the Bible, Hebrew Bible, translated into German. So that, you know, lots of people will look at German assimilation and think, that was the step, that was the misstep of kind of, so I don't know, you know, internally how he dealt with that, but you know, it just sort of, it's my past, and what does it have to do with me? I'm here, I'm a proud German. You know, it's a lot of wanting to belong, and wanting to be, I mean, you know, I think it's kind of human that we all want to be part of the group in a way, and feel safe.
So, I wanted to know a little more about Mahler. You played a Mahler piece, and Mahler specifically, it's not only because he was Jewish, but also he himself called himself a three-time described himself a three-time homeless, not exactly, you know, for his Jewishness, but also he said, and I'm reading here, an Austrian among Germans. He was a Bohemian in Austria. He was born in the Czech Republic, and he was also then, he said, a Jew throughout the world. And he was, for that, he has said, for all that, everywhere an intruder, never welcomed. So that piece kind of really, and it's so sad and it's so heavy, it really symbolizes kind of all that. What do you have to say about that?
Well, actually, he converted to Catholicism, and out of all these different composers that I touch on, he's the only one who kind of was motivated by faith. The rest of them were, I think, just making a practical decision.
He was the director of the Vienna State Opera around 1890, I think 87, for 10 years. And to be the music director of the Vienna State Opera, you had to be a Christian. And that is also one of the reasons I would believe that.
Yeah, 100%. Yes, it was a practical decision, but then he kind of got taken up with some of the mysticism I'm not a person to define or describe Catholicism necessarily, but I think that there were things about it that attracted him. But yeah, I love that quote. Actually, this film has a longer version, and that I do include that quote in it because it kind of exemplifies this whole kind of statelessness of Jews in the world, and now we do have a state, so that's new. And of course, I mean, with Mahler, it's sort of the emotional meat of the program, musically speaking. I mean, it's just so, all those, for a musician, all those the suspended seconds and that tension and resolve and all. So he's an interesting person as well as his wife. Yes.
Carolyn, did your godmother and father share their story with you since you were a little girl, or did you learn it later on in life?
So that's a great question because my godmother never stopped talking about it and my father never talked about it. And I'm also a member of the second generation group, and I wouldn't say that I can make a generality. It's not the first time that I've heard that the father survivor didn't talk much, and that it's not uncommon. But my father, growing up, I knew that we all knew that there was sort of something like, for not talking about it, it was the loudest elephant in the room. So kids pick up on everything. And my godmother, so her brother, who was killed in Auschwitz, was my father's best friend. And the whole reason we moved to Tenafly, New Jersey was because my godparents were there. And so they came over quite a lot, and she was always talking. I would imagine she was I couldn't get over it and was processing all the time.
Was your life I'm from Long Island and I'm a child of survivors. So my question to you is, was your life filled with Holocaust survivors as the social element as it was for me?
Not so much. Well, that's the other thing, is that my father basically didn't have much of this. He wasn't particularly social. My mother was. She went to church regularly, but the only people that we had over for dinner were the Steinfelds, and I looked forward to that because I was able to then pick up on more because I was so curious. And she sort of helped. She didn't necessarily fill in blanks, and I also kind of picked up that this is something that we're not supposed to be talking about. So in a sense, I didn't ask questions. And then the documents that you saw in the film, they were not in our household as I was growing up. They only came into our household after my father's father passed away. And he went to Germany to my grandfather's funeral, came back with this notebook filled with these things. And I, of course, very curiously was looking through everything and seeing these Nazi stamps and everything. I was like, and late at night, no one knew that I was looking through these things. And and felt sort of shock and horror that these things, these are my family documents with these, I mean, they're very triggering, these stamps, and I don't know, I was probably like 16 or 18 or so, and so this Vassar going back and forth. So in order to, initially I was continuing to come to Manhattan every 2 weeks to continue studying, having piano lessons with my high school piano teacher. And one of the times that I came down, my father picked me up from the train, and on the way home, he just started telling me kind of, you know, the sequence. And it's the strangest sensation to, I was listening with, it felt as if I was covering my ears while I was listening. So it's like listening in a pillow or something, because I had learned not to know this or not to ask about it or so. And then here he was sort of like spilling the beans, and I still was feeling as if, oh, wait a second, we're not supposed to be talking about this. But then, of course, intensely curious about all the details and needing to kind of, uh-oh, this might be like the one and only time I hear this. How am I going to remember everything? And then anytime I would, you know, continue to think about it, and then want to ask a question this way or that way about, you know, a particular detail or so. But the mental gymnastics that I would go through to pose a question, because it was like, well, am I going to shatter this moment with my persistent kind of curiosity about this? Because I don't know, you know, like, there must be something about it that we're not supposed to talk about, because that's what we've been doing all this time, is not talking about it. And so there's got to be pain around it, because he was a sort of angry, depressive, slightly, you know, and also a really kind of very, very, very intensely proud American. So, you know, I had to kind of piece details together also to kind of put together, you know, asking him questions, asking my cousin in Germany questions, and I also, I've always wanted to know, you know, well, which camp were you in? And I got various answers. And then I realized when I went to Gross Rosen and all the sub-camps were listed on the wall, I was like, oh, no wonder there wasn't a one-word answer, because he was in as a laborer, and as a, you know, forced labor would then get moved around wherever the labor was needed. So that kind of made sense. So no, I don't know that I could say, because my mother wasn't a survivor, so I didn't have that sort of like, you know, very Holocaust survivor, Jewish, kind of, that's all we know, that's all we ever talk about, because my mom was not part of that story. So I don't know, she was my Girl Scout leader, you know, like it was kind of like very American in some ways. But you know what, some kids, because my father had a German accent, so post-war, that was not, you know, not the best thing to have. And kids threw rocks at our house at one point, yeah, just thinking that he was a German, you know, yeah, on the other side of the enemy, right? So, anyway. Yes?
I had a question about, I couldn't get the genealogy down, so...
Sir, just one moment. Yeah, sure.
So your father was, so you're talking about your godmother, but she's not biologically related to you, correct?
No, no, she just feels like it.
But that's the Steinbergs, correct? That's the
Steinfelds, yes.
Steinfelds. So your father, you were talking about the classifications of the Mischlingen, the 2 grandparents and the 1. Was your father, did he have three Aryan, or he was at Class A then?
Class A, 2 and 2, yeah.
And did the National Socialists, did they hardly discriminate against, were those people deported to Auschwitz? Like if you were you had 3 grandparents, that was enough to be.
Well, I mean, the camps that he was in, they were specifically for Mischlinge.
Okay.
The camps, the forced labor camps that were specifically, it was all Mischlinge that were in the camps that he were.
Did it matter whether you were A or B? Or B kind of passed over?
No, I don't think that the B were passed over necessarily. I think that it's hard to make generalizations, I think, in general about Holocaust stories, because it's one by one, and it's overwhelming for us to kind of hold that because there are so many. But each story is it's very particular and individual, and especially with survivors, you know, luck plays a big piece of it, part of it. And so, for example, it's something that you can probably Google. The poster German soldier, the ideal, he was actually a Mischling grade B, so, but he's blonde and blue-eyed, so he fit. And you know, yeah, the other thing that you have to remember is, so in a sense, like, things sound like there was a hard and fastness to this whole horror, and yet. And then there are situations that weren't necessarily hard and fast, because Hitler could Aryanize somebody with the sign of a pen. So, and in a sense, like, what was useful to him, the Air Force, I think somebody very, very, very high up in the Air Force was either a Mischling or a German Jew, and overlooked because he was so necessary for his other, you know, war goals. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened with the Nuremberg laws, and then ultimately like the Wannsee conference, where they really tried to figure out, like, what do we do with all these people? I was at a training once, and I'm married to someone who's not Jewish, so my children are, you know, partially not Jewish, or I didn't want to say it, like, my husband's not Jewish. And so they basically used me as an example of, like, what are your children? You know, I said, well, I've got a daughter who's 16 and a son who's 14. He's like, oh, they're childbearing age. I said, does it help that my daughter's 5'9" and blonde and blue-eyed? He said, actually, it does. You know, and the fact that people actually sat there and tried to figure out, how are we going to categorize all these people? What do we do? Because they had this idea, right, of we want to rid Germany of Jews. But it's way more complicated because people in society and life is more complicated, right? And you're falling in love and marrying the people that you marry for all different kinds of reasons. And the fact that people sat in a room and tried to figure out which people fit in this utopia that they imagined and which ones don't is one of the most disgusting parts about that whole experiment.
Well, you know this because the Nazis did not define Judaism according to Jewish law, that if your mother was Jewish,
Yeah,
you're Jewish.
exactly.
It was all based upon, you know, genetics and blood and all of that stuff, which is why they went the way they went.
Well, this is racial science, right? But it's.
And that was very powerful in this country. Oliver Wendell Holmes, the Chief Justice of the United States, was an advocate for eugenics, so it was kind of an international.
Well, Hitler saw that it wasn't a problem here, and he folded it in. But the whole premise is it doesn't hold water.
Well, a lot of radical extreme ideology doesn't.
Right. No, right. I mean, like, what race are? I'll sign up for a human race. You know what I'll sign up for? Not using the word race, period.
There's one of the worst anecdotes and worst hypocritical anecdotes of the Nazi period having to do with what you look like, your phenotype.
Yes.
Hitler was somewhere near one of the extermination sites, and he saw a totally blonde, tall man who looked totally Aryan, could have walked out of a Nazi picture, and he said, "You can't possibly be Jewish." And all the man had to say is, "I'm not Jewish," and he would have saved his life. But he insisted he was Jewish, and then Hitler said, "I can't help you." And you look at that, this is the insanity that these people.
Wow. Here, and we'll do one more, and then we can, go up and you can mingle and talk, but we'll do one more question.
As many as
you desire.
I just wanted to, I don't know if people are aware, the way they got the, Mischlinge and the different generations, they went to the United States. They send people to study Southern laws regarding segregation and how we defined one drop of blood made you black. And actually, they decided not to go that far in the generations going back to 1/8 and 1/16, etc. So we.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes.
Just learned something.
Yeah, that's an important part that we share, especially with our students that come through, is that, you know, the Nuremberg laws were based and inspired by U.S. race laws. It's an important connector point for students to realize. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yes.
And thank you.
Oh, thank you, Emily.
And thank you everyone for coming.